Welcome to the podcast, by the way. This is totally not at all
Hold on.
professional.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not at all ready yet.
It's a pilot episode. Don't worry
It's a
about it.
pilot episode. So normally, what you guys will see, aside from my bright ass window, is you'll see Kath and Oxy here. In the background right now, Oxy is going to be showing us all the rare and hidden vehicles in War Thunder. And yeah, so this is going to be a podcast that we all co-host every Sunday, 12 p.m. EST. If you guys want to give the GMT time for that, I'm not too good with it.
Plus 5. It's 5 o'clock.
Not 5.
Yeah.
So 5 p.m. GMT. It's a War Thunder podcast. We're going to talk about War Thunder stuff. As it gets better and more comfortable, I figure we probably will talk about other things as well. Maybe after the War Thunder segment, stay on for another hour or so. But we have some bullet points today. Obviously, as the first podcast, it's not going to be perfect. But the name of this is Angle Better. I think it's good meaning, right? Like,
yeah, I'm a fan.
We always say that. It's just kind of been a G Squad thing for a while. It's just whenever anybody bitches at us, we say, just angle better. It's a very ominous, very fucking, what am I looking for?
Fucking tiger's dying. Just angle better.
Just angle better. So, if you guys like to talk a little bit about yourself before we start this, just, preface the whole situation in case anybody doesn't know who you are. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay. Hello.
And then
my
you guys,
name is
when I get
Oxygen Thief. I live in the southeast of England.
True, but also incorrect, as that is not me.
Yeah, true. So, yeah, just do that. And when I come back, we can start with the first topic. We'll jump right into it. And I told everybody that, yeah, we already talked about it. It's going to be a little wanky, right? It'll be a little wanky, the podcast.
It's a pilot. Iron out kinks.
It's a pilot. Yeah. That's why I didn't promote it so heavy this week. So I'll be right back.
Little proof of concept. Little sort of taster of things to come. So I guess who's going first? You or me?
You. I'm necking my coffee.
All right. My name's Kath. I'm a War Thunder streamer. I don't really have a presence on YouTube, so if you find me on Twitch if you want to. I'm approaching my 1-year anniversary of doing the streamy thing. It comes at the end of this month, and I don't know what I'm going to do. But yeah, I do the things, mostly play top tier. Tanks more than planes. That's about it, really.
Swing. I guess most people already know who I am, but if you don't, I am the dude who has all the stuff and at some points has it all spaded and plays everything and grinds out all the camos for useless tanks for no reason at all other than being like a really bad use of my time. I stream sometimes and make YouTube videos sometimes and have very poor time management and end up making videos that are really, really long and take months to make, which is probably why I disappear sometimes. But yeah.
He also likes bread.
I do. It's really good. I've got 2 loaves in the kitchen right now, just waiting. Haven't cracked them open yet.
I love that you can crack open a loaf. You can't crack open a loaf. So, should we wait for Slick to finish shitting, or should we start discussing things?
I think we should probably wait a little bit.
Just this is the man who stole the olive oil from a homeless man. Yes, correct.
I didn't intend to.
What did you not intend to do? Did you not intend to steal the olive oil, or did you not intend to steal it from a homeless person?
I didn't know it was olive oil, and I didn't know there was a man there. I thought it was a bundle of things that weren't a person. But it turns out it was a person.
That's the best way to describe you, actually. You took a homeless man's olive oil.
I think the best way to describe me is that I was sick in a glass on Friday.
Okay, so yeah, do we have topics? You guys want to start?
We have topics. If you look in the Discord channel, Mr. Slick, you will see the pinned message. The latest pinned message is the one that we've pared down the sort of discussion
topics. All right, sounds awesome. Let me take a look. All right.
So, spotter plane. Spotter planes being something that's been discussed recently, or I'd say recently, not particularly recently, but in light of new mechanics such as helicopters coming to ground battles, spotter planes have come to prevalence. It's been something mentioned on the Gaijin's Twitter by myself. It's been discussed on Reddit over the course of years, every now and then, people talking about bringing it in. When it came to ARB, there was no real reason to do the thing. But now that we've got, sort of ground battles developed to a certain state and we have spotting mechanics on tanks, the need, or rather the sort of discussion and want for spotting planes has come to the fore.
I agree. I think spotting planes would be cool. I think this is something that we mentioned, like, not I say we, but I think Baron and I even talked about this way back in the day. When they first implemented tanks, we always thought, like, it'd be cool to have some sort of plane that would get a bonus for scouting tanks or scouting other things, even with the boats that are now out. And hopefully, cross fingers, subs in the future, right? Like, how cool would it be to spot a sub in a plane?
So to be honestly, I would love to use like a Mosquito 18 or a PBJ-1H, the cannons on them that were basically designed to shoot submarines. I'd love to use them on subs.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think I really like the idea of spotting planes. I think it's like an entire branch of aviation that's completely, well, not completely, but mostly neglected in War Thunder, and it's just kind of a shame to not have them represented. Because some of them are pretty interesting, but the main, I think, problem is this: they're quite hard to implement from a gameplay standpoint, especially across all the modes. So you can, I guess, in tank battles, you can just kind of assume that you can, when you get enough spawn points, you can take out a spotter plane and point your crosshair over a tank, and it'll get pinged on the map, and you get some RP. But I think there are a lot of problems that really come from that, like because you imagine they'd probably be more useful being taken out at the beginning of a match, but then how do you limit them? There's loads of problems that come up with it, but I think as a concept they are really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be developed in terms of the actual concept itself, but the sort of, I suppose, general theory behind it, in that you could have, these slow as fuck unarmed planes. Think Po2s, think like L4s, think, what the fuck is it called? The British equivalent. I can't remember for the life of me. Westland.
Lysander they had, I think.
Lysander, yes, Westland Lysander. There is something that you could bring in for each nation. Now, there is no development really. These planes were used at the start of the war and they were used at the end of the war. Some of them graduated onto Korea. You end up with there's Mad Major Carpenter who put six bazookas onto his L4 and tried to go hunt tanks with it. So there's that's an option, I suppose, for development, putting stupid things on them, but they're not going. You're not going to have a whole tech tree of spotter planes really.
I just think it'd be a cool little feature. Now, this segues into something else I kind of want to talk about, because scout helicopters, right? How I think scout helicopters could work really well too, because you get a helicopter like the Apache, say, which is not necessarily a scout helicopter, it's an attack helicopter, but an Apache longbow has the ability to scout. It's got that big dome on top of the rotors.
That longbow also gives the certain types of Mavericks that it has, that it'll just sort of ping a target from miles away and fire and forget it, and it's a big sort of battleground targeting environment that comes from the longbow radar.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even just giving the spotting ability to helicopters, I think, could be a thing. But you run the risk basically of turning RB into arcade. If you have too many ways of spotting, you have all these different sort of mechanics of spotting and vehicles of spotting. You get 3 or 4 of them, even 1 or 2 of them in the air. Suddenly you've got something being spotted every 10-15 seconds, and if that goes to 20 odd seconds, it's going to take a long time for those marks to go away, and they're going to build up.
Yeah, it's something that I think, if it were to be implemented, I think it needs to be limited quite strongly in that regard. But it's finding that limitation, I think, that's the main thing, and what classifies as like a scout helicopter, I guess, like in terms of the game, not in terms of real life, because I guess some of the utility helicopters could fill that role, but maybe not some of the attack helicopters, to kind of balance it out, so it's not all of them doing it.
Yeah, agreed. I think like special variations of utility helicopters. I think mainly of the Kiowa whenever I think of something that's meant to scout, which is, a small little
Yes.
helicopter that's specifically designed to scout, and scouting's a big part.
Kiowas could carry
They could-
hydras.
They could carry hydras. I'm pretty sure they could carry hellfires too. Later on variants and stuff. They carried AGMs. I'm sure they wouldn't have a problem strapping them on. And even if it wasn't necessarily the loadout for a helicopter like that, I don't mind them cutting some corners to make them a little versatile. You know, kind of like the German helicopters in game. I mean, they have no offensive armament. If they had a scout feature, obviously they weren't scout helicopters like that, but you know, that it would work. I think they wouldn't be overpowered.
Yeah. What about? I don't really know much about helicopters at all, really. But is there? 'Cause I think it's important to kind of make it somewhat realistic in terms of the game. So would there be something like a particular bit of equipment that you could give to a helicopter, like as a modification, that could make it become like a scout helicopter that you could go
Dude.
give to the BA-105?
I was researching the other day, just kind of on a tangent, but sort of related, the sort of relationship between air and ground when it came to US military development, sort of World War II into Korea into Vietnam, and the way that they used to do artillery spotting and fucking forward air control and things like this, and they would have either spotters on the ground that were pilots. They would do a tour on the ground and they would use the radios that way, or they would have people in fucking helicopters calling in close air support, like fixed wing close air support and bombs and stuff from the helicopter, basically just with a pair of binoculars and a big old radio. So in terms of spotting that way, it's not outside the realms of possibility. I mean, another thing that you could discuss is that helicopters have been used for artillery spotting for as long as helicopters have been around. It would be really easy to give helicopters the ability to drop artillery. I wouldn't say that artillery is powerful enough.
Oh,
That's
see, that's something I didn't even think about, but that would be fun. Especially with like some type of third person view. Like we already have that circle when you go into the alternate artillery drop camera.
I really like that.
I think that would be cool. That would be pretty cool to see from the air.
Yeah, coding wise, Gaiden has definitely proved that they can do sort of things tied to the free camera with the gunner's view. The gunner's reticle, as you turn. I know nobody really uses the guns in ground RP, but you can obviously when you turn your head with the C camera, you can fire the gun at different places. So you can definitely tie that mechanic to the artillery spotting, for example.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I think at least for something like that, in terms of balancing the helicopters, I think through modifications or just by creating set helicopters for set roles, they should either only be like attack helicopters with ATGMs or rockets, or just scout helicopters with this, say, artillery ability, or just a spotting ability. I don't think they should be.
Continue.
I don't think they should be sort of on the same platform.
Everything.
I think it would be a little bit too overpowered like that if they had ATGMs and scouts. I think it would become a bit too messy.
That's a good point. So like what I was thinking is maybe if you have the scout attachment or modification for a helicopter, you can only carry hydras, but if you have the normal helicopter, you can carry AGMs or something. So it kind of balances it out. This kind of segues into something else I want to talk about that isn't necessarily on this list, but we can come back to what we were, we can jump back to it. But I want some way, like surface-to-air missiles. I don't know how else to put it. Like point blank, I want surface-to-air missiles. I want like a Tunguska with not only a radar-guided gun like cannon that they have in game right now, but something with side-mounted SAMs that can, reach these helicopters from distances far away. Because and then obviously there'd be chaff or some type of flares or something for the helicopters to defend themselves. But I think this notion of like AH-1Zs, I've been getting killed by them more and more now that more people are getting them, where they'll just sit super high up with 16 ATGMs. There's no skill in that, and they just wait for a plane to come up and kill them. There's not.
Oh, look, you can do what I do. If you've got a decently sized screen and a low DPI button on your mouse, you can sit fucking miles and miles away. Sorry, swearing, shouldn't do that on this podcast. You can sit miles and miles and miles away and be out of the range of anything except fixed-wing aircraft. That's all that's going to come at you.
Yeah.
So there is a limit to the amount of counterplay that you have for helicopters, but something that I've suggested when it comes to this, in terms of sitting far away and firing, missiles, like you say, you can either bring in sort of surface-to-air missiles and things like this, or the other option is the easiest way to nerf these helicopters just reduce the optics capability or reduce the stabilizing capability of the optics. Because if they can't fire the missiles as well, they can't hit their targets as well. And if they can't hit their targets as well, they're not going to get as many kills. They have to be closer to do the same damage.
I agree with that. Oxy, how do you feel about that?
See, I don't really play top tier much, so I don't really know if I have much of an opinion on the whole thing, so I don't experience it. But along the lines of the surface to air missiles, I think in one of the dev Q&As, one of the developers said they were looking into developing it, I think, or something along those lines. So I think it would definitely be possible. And I think it's kind of, it might be coming, and it's a really stupid reason why I think they might be, and it's because they haven't moved up the radar SPA yet. They stop at 8.0, where I think
Yeah.
some of them could be a bit higher, and I think they've done that deliberately to leave space for adding SPA with missiles on them.
And I'm not talking about something that's just going to like lock on and instantly kill. I do think there should be countermeasures implemented with these things. But I mean, as far as somebody who has been playing helicopters, I think it's fun and challenging for me to try to stay low and use the terrain that's given to you. I kind of don't even like the fact that you get an air spawn always. I would be fine if you spawned on the helipad but had to, rotate. You're already rotating at least, so you could take off.
Yeah.
But I think putting more pressure on players to like play the helicopters how helicopters really would fly in a war zone that.
You should be doing creepy,
Yeah.
nap of the earth, popping up from like trees, firing a missile and dropping back down again and disappearing. This is how they're supposed to be used. That's how they are used IRL. But from a gameplay and killing people perspective, it's easier just to sit and hover and fire all your missiles and land as fast as possible and then do it again and do it again and do it again. So there needs to be some way to make that have less of a payoff, to make the actual way that you're supposed to play these things more viable as a strategy.
Well, I think one thing they could change relative to this is that, as far as I know, like I might be wrong on this, but as far as I know, if a helicopter is very close to the ground or behind a mountain or near cover, if it's too low to a piece of terrain, it can't get locked on to by anti-air radar. I think if that was implemented, it would make it a lot easier to skulk around the map. Because I mean, right now in an SPA, they can just hold down the scout, or not the scout, the target lock button.
Yeah, target acquisition.
And they'll look around for the like the little box that goes around them and find them like that. And if that was kind of limited, I think if the SPA was limited in regards to actually taking them out lower to the ground, which they should be, as far as I know, that's right. I think it would make it a little bit easier at least. Probably not against tanks using their main guns, because that seems still quite easy to do. But I think it would make it a little bit easier to play like that anyway. Like they should be played.
I'm not sure about NATO doctrine, but I know that the Russians were actually actively trained to use their ATGMs, their full bore ATGMs from tanks against helicopters. It was part of the training to be like, if you see a tank helicopter, you fire a missile.
I think that's pretty cool.
Just slightly off on a tangent as well. Obviously, the radar AA that we have in the game, the way that it works in the game is very different to how they work in real life. Because in real life, they get a radar ping, they fucking automatically track the damn thing, automatically follow exactly what it is, and then the operator presses the button and it fires. Later versions even have IFF, so they're not going to track anything that's got a friendly signature.
They're quite automatic then.
They're quite automatic.
Yeah, I think the top tier radar SPA probably needs a little bit of tweaking in terms of how they work. I think so it is just a little bit. I mean, they should be easy to take out aircraft with, but I think they're a little bit too good at the moment for quite a few aircraft and helicopters and things. But again, I don't play very much. They might be balanced more than I think, but
I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of missiles, there has been photos from the in-game files of ATG of Strela. I think it's Strelas on the wings of Heinz. They exist. They exist in the game files.
That's interesting. Just to touch on that AA thing, it's there are people who complain about the radar AA being overpowered or whatnot. I could see how it's pretty easy to shoot radar AA, but I also don't have a tough time killing them when I'm in a plane or a helicopter. Just kind of because I use terrain, I use low level flying, and Of course, if you're going against an AA player who knows what they're doing, they're going to spam the target acquisition and fine you. But if you don't do that, and you're playing against people who aren't really 100% looking for just planes, they're dealing with a ground battle, you can quite easily sneak up on people and get some kills on AA because they are the weakest vehicles in the game. I mean, a 163 is not going to withstand a Tiny Ivan or even a HVAR, They get killed by all rockets in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to just launch and track and kill people with the FJ missiles from miles away. If they're firing at another aircraft, I just fire at the origin of the traces and done.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a difficult thing to deal with them. Which leads us quite interestingly onto the problem vehicles. I know it's not in the right order, but the problem vehicles headline, namely the FJ in top tier.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it's the VMF 232 in its current state as a unique vehicle and a unique fulcrum for the US to use that no other nation has an equivalent of yet.
I agree. I think they should definitely add some equality with those missiles or something along the lines for other nations. And even if it's not at the quantity that it is on the FJ, maybe you don't need to give every nation a plane with 5 missiles that are guided like that, because I think the FJ it's a different story, but it kind of needs to be buffed. I feel like its performance is pretty subpar for what it seemed like it was in real life. No, just as a plane flying by itself. Like this was supposed to be a plane in real life that was going to be the naval version of the Sabre, and the Sabre is so much better than it in game.
This is true.
They're completely night and day, and it's pretty much the same plane. There's a lot of similar designs. They have swept wings. It's just a little bit smaller, I feel like. Obviously, having AGMs on the plane makes it heavier, but...
Well, as you know, I've created a list of comparable aircraft for other nations.
Oh, yeah? Where's that list?
Yeah, well, if you want to open up the Discord thing and you can click stuff as I say it, you'll be able to get the photos up. So you've got, for the Italians or the Germans, you can have AS-20s on a G91. So obviously the Germans use G91s. There's no reason that they couldn't have a G91 in the game. And there is no reason really why MD-450s couldn't also carry AS-20 AGMs. All the missiles that I'm about to mention are basically on par with, but it's functionally on par with bullpups, give or take some, things here and there. The G91s also use something called Suras, which is a Hispano missile. Suras or Sunom, I believe the one is. They're essentially just rocket pods, 32 rocket pods per the G91s, on either wing. And they have pens of 330, 350, or 450 millimeters, respectively, depending on the variant. The G91Y specifically, top speed of 1,100 kilometers an hour, pylons to carry 1,814 kilograms of ordnance, is essentially on par with the FJ. Now, you know that if you put a G91 against an FJ in ARB, the G91's probably going to win.
Yeah, probably. And let's not even touch on the fact that the German variations use 30 mils.
Yes, they do.
So they didn't have quad 50s. They have 30 mils, which are awesome. They're very similar, I believe, to the Aidens. I think they are. They're, if not a different licensed version of the Aiden. I don't know, but I think they're very close to that.
Yeah. So Germany and France, AS-20 missiles on various airframes that are the sort of parallel to the FJ. The UK has either the Supermarine Scimitar or the Blackburn Buccaneer, which have both got sort of 1,070 to 1,185 kilometers an hour top speeds, respectively. So they're still sort of in the general region of top tier aircraft. There's nothing incredibly powerful out the way there, and it's easy enough, as we've seen with the FJ, to just knock some stuff down a bit, knock some speed off it. Harriers as well. You can mention Harriers, but basically the UK used bullpups. You could get 4 bullpups on a Scimitar, and on the Buccaneer is quite interesting. 4 pylons, again, 1814 kilograms, and then an internal bomb bay of 5.4 tons.
This is a very good looking jet too. I like it.
Oh, you can see, yeah, you can see the bomb bay there.
Oh, look at those pylons. So this is it looks like 3 1000s on each of the struts.
And the Buccaneer only goes up to 1074 kilometers an hour, so that's well within what we've already got. Like these realistically, imagine trying to bomb SPAA with that thing. Like, it's not going to be so overpowered that it's difficult to kill. But
What about
you know,
the
I'm just talking
Frogfoot?
about parity, really. Yeah, the Frogfoot is what I was going to get to next. KH-23 AGMs, the obvious choice of the Frogfoot. But the array of armament that you can get on this aircraft is incredible. It only goes 975 kilometers an hour at top speed, but my God, can it carry a lot of ordnance?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's just a picture from DCS. It's got rocket pods. So it looks like it has 8 pylons on the wings.
Yeah, they're what, S5Ks, I think. S25s, not sure. But I mean, the amount of stuff that you can get, you would have to limit what the Su-25 could carry, really.
Yeah.
But in terms of the current state of the game,
Look at that one.
the
Oh,
Americans
man.
have the FJ.
Holy shit.
You're just fanboying over this stuff.
I mean, 8
Like,
rocket pods?
yeah.
Yeah.
But your Yanks have got the FJ, and you need parity for other nations, and there are options for parity for other nations. But the question is now, the VMF has been introduced as an event plane. You can no longer get it. You can buy it, but you can't earn it in game. The Tech Tree FJ doesn't have bullpups. So to have equivalent things in other nations, you either need to give the Tech Tree FJ bullpups and then expand on everything else, or have every other nation just have event planes as well, which doesn't seem very nifty.
Well, from what I know and from what I can kind of get from what Gaijin did with implementing this, the reason why it's a gift thing was to limit its numbers inherently, and I think that was because the FJ with the ATGMs was like a test bed, so it's the best way to do it. They're on the live server, but they're in limited enough numbers, so not everyone's spamming them, and you know, if it doesn't work out, they can deal with it easier than implementing new ground striking machines that had that as the main armament. So what I think is, since this is clearly like it's not massively overpowered, it's working, they're going to use what the FJs kind of become and use that as kind of like a rough middle ground to make other aircraft with similar ground striking ordnance for other nations. I think probably, at least for the time being, and obviously I don't know as much about this stuff as you two, but from what I can kind of gather, I think what they'll probably do is add either add new aircraft for every nation or just give existing aircraft similar ordnance. And I think it's going to be like fighter bombers kind of thing. I think that's the direction they're probably going with, at least for the time being.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at the current state of the game, with just the Americans having the FJ, even if it is unlimited numbers, it still unbalances and tips the balance in games. Like, it's easy enough to fly that thing out and get 5 kills on top tier tanks, and that is more than enough to tip the scales when you can do it in 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
So the current state, the FJ is a prime mover that the other nations do not have an equivalent of, and if they do end up introducing other stuff for other nations, it's still going to be imbalanced, because then the US will have to have 2. Because if you add them to every other nation, then you need to add them to the Tech Tree one, because not everyone has access to the limited one. If you add them to the Tech Tree one, America still has this overarching thing of, we've got the deepest, biggest lineup at top tier.
True.
They're still going to have that, and you can still spawn, a lot of your vehicles in one match. So there's still going to be some wonkiness there.
I guess what they could do, I suppose, I mean, I don't know, this is historical to the aircraft, but they could give the Tech Tree variant maybe only 2 missiles or 3 missiles, just to limit it a little bit.
That's fair.
I guess that would be like a decent enough compromise.
Agreed. So I kind of want to shift focus, but we're still going to be talking about planes. This is a big topic that I think a lot of people care about, myself included. I've been playing War Thunder for far too long to see ARB kind of turn into what it has. So, ARB, what are you guys' thoughts?
A big sad.
Big sad. So we wrote down a couple things that we can touch on that would maybe help, make ARB more interesting again. but I think some of the biggest issues stem from the setup of the game mode and how it
Yeah.
hasn't really changed in 5, 6 years, right? It's been the same.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that's mainly what the biggest problem is. It's like you can kind of touch it up by adding different dynamic things like around the map, but it doesn't really eliminate the main problem. And to be honest, I mean, I think a lot of the problem is, for most people, is that for 5 so minutes of the match, you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
But it's like, how do you safely remove that element? I think there's definitely things you can do, but I mean, I guess from their perspective, it's quite difficult, I think, to completely remove that element of nothing going on. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the problems they're like legacy mechanics that have been in War Thunder since the beta, and they just haven't changed them. Like AAA on airfields, that feels like a legacy mechanic they just have never bothered to change.
Yes.
And it's like I mean, I was talking to a good friend of mine who doesn't play anymore, mainly because of AA, and it's like over time, after like the 10th time you get killed by base AA, it's like, well, this is annoying, but after the 100th time, that's enough to make you stop. So I think it is a big problem, and I know a lot of people try to say it's not a big problem, people can deal with it, but I think it's the little things like that, like the inherent mechanics, that are really eventually pushing people away from it, because the mode's fun, and it's nice having dogfights, but I think from my perspective, I think I don't play ARB anymore because I get what I want from it in tank battles. I can have little
Exactly.
dogfights
That's
with
a
planes
huge thing.
over. Exactly, yeah. And it's like that, to me, it shows, at least for me. I mean, I'm sure other people get more pleasure in RB or ARB through different things, but I like the little dogfights, and I can have those quickly and like in little bite-sized chunks in tank matches, and that's where I think quite a lot of the fun of RB is. But it's condensed and it's in this other mode, and it's like, well, what's the point in playing RB anymore? And a lot of it is just the bits in between when nothing's happening, and I think that's, yeah, it's most of the problem, I think.
So I have some opinions. Um, Climb time is something that in its essence, it needs to exist, because so the differences in climb rate and climb speed and positioning and things like this that you can attain, from that climbing, and the choices that you make when doing these, that you forget we've all been playing for a long time. We've all put a lot of time into RB. I mean, to the point where maxed out on pretty much everything. So for us, compared to a new player, it's going to be quite different. I think climb time, as it is problematic, but it could be fixed by a means of providing sort of multiple air spawns across a different section of the map, perhaps, and then give aircraft, as relates to their modifications, different. Sorry about the fireworks. Yeah, give them uh, altitudes in comparison to what their climb rate would be after, say, 5 minutes. So if plane X would get to this height after this time and it spawns in this place because it's the person who decided to use that spawn, fair enough. You still have the sort of tactical disposition across the map that you would get from climbing. You still have the different altitudes in a optimal state that you would get from climbing without 5 to 10 minutes of climbing. So no, you can provide people with the spawns at those positions that they would be without having them be in that place. And then obviously when they land and take off again, they're coming from the airfield, they have to. But for that initial part, the way that you would cut it out would be to just give people the altitude that they would otherwise have after that time, based on the stats of the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
So
I,
my idea on this whole thing is, I like the new EC that they came up with, that they came out with no markers, right? And I don't think there's always going to be people who are on both sides of this, but my opinion, just an idea that I think something that would, if it was changed, would work better, is if they changed ARB into like a more of a fighters only mode, where you do get these air spawns and you can just duke it out and have those dogfights that you similar to what you get in a ground force battle, but just in ARB. You don't have to worry about the tanks and the AA shooting at you. And then we leave the bombers and all of that stuff to a large scale game like an EC game where you can use your bomber to your full potential and you can take out a fighter and you get that climb time and you get the whole moving around the map and you have to go back and land and refuel and do all this stuff. I think it would add more dynamic stuff. I'd also like to see events come back. Things like Flight of the Swallows.
Yeah.
Flight of the Swallows is the one that we always.
That's the most iconic one that I
so
can think of
good.
because it was so fun. Yeah, and especially now that we have the P-51H in the game, I mean that's a more even fight with the 262. It's going to be it would be really really fun to see how that played out.
I would like to see kind of enduring conflict, right, but with actual sorties. So
Yes.
this was discussed, I think, but it would give you a list of planes, say within a given battle rating. It would give both teams a list of planes, or players in particular a list of planes, and say you could go on this mission with an IL-2, and then someone else that's spawning in on the other team will get a mission saying stop these IL-2s. So you have like these targeted attack and defend things within the confines of enduring conflict. You can choose to take them, you can choose to not take them, but they'll focus the fight. And that ties into the whole sort of ground targets thing. At the moment, ground targets and attackers, which I've spent a fair amount of time flying, not in a particularly good state. It's spawn in, get what you can before the fighters kill you.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I'll just real quick. If it was like a sortie related thing and the EC kind of changed from day to day, like what I'm thinking is the biggest things are like B-17 sorties. So imagine like an EC style map where you can land and spawn in like respawns and stuff. But the initial start of the match, when you first join it, you all spawn in this big bomber formation. And then it'll become progressive after that, depending on who dies, and they have to spawn up and they have to fly back up to the group, or maybe it'll change to a different type of task. You have to go now, maybe the team that was on the defensive is now going and attacking ground targets or something like that. So somebody who was in a 109, say, and they lost factories, this is all just hypothetical, but they lost the factories, now has to switch to a duck or an HE-219 and go attack some tanks and get cover from different fighters and stuff. I think that'd be
World
pretty
War
cool.
II Online did the sort of aircraft dynamic quite well. I don't know if either of you played it.
No, I haven't.
They would basically, over the course of a couple of weeks, months, depending on the length of the campaign, go from 1939 at the start of the war through to, as the game developed over the years, it got later and later and later, and eventually the Americans came in, but you would have like the British and the French and the Germans essentially to begin with. And it would you'd have basically players saying, we're going to do this thing, we're going to do this bomber run, and it was all sort of player organized. I don't think that the capacity for this exists in War Thunder, but people would like say, right, we're going to go do a bombing run on the factories, and they would start on an airfield in Germany, they would take off, they would fly, they would go bomb it, and they would come back again. And as they were flying on the map, there would be notifications on the enemy team saying, we've detected this many planes in this place, this place, this place, and they're flying back across, and then the players on the allied team or whatever are having to create interception sorties themselves. So if that framework can be a bit more automated in terms of sort of organization by the game in enduring confrontation, it doesn't have to be massive amounts of big old flights of players and stuff, but you can focus that, and that would be far more engaging than just, I'm going to spawn in an air battle in a bomber. Oh, look, left. Oh, someone got me, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like within the confines of enduring confrontation, you have so much scope to focus the fight into these little sort of engagements and instances of excitement. There is a lot of potential.
I agree. I think there's a ton of potential. Now, just to switch gears a little bit and continue to talk about ARB, but some of the things that make ARB a nuisance to play now, especially for me, I've noticed a lot of these things. So we have people who space climb, run away all game. We have people who run back to the airfield and use the overpowered airfield AA to defend them because they don't want to actually fight you. People just taking too long in general in games, progressing the time of the already 5-minute climb period, and then however long you're in combat, and then even if you have to go back and then come back, and then you find out there's a guy space climbing, or losing games because of the bomber setup and the inequalities in the team matchups. So like there'll be a top tier jet team with 14 or IL-28s, and of course those IL-28s, if they don't get all of the bomb sites, you're not going to win the game, and they're just going to die. That's taking MiG-17s off of your team, so it can create these kind of extreme losses in top tier, which feel really unfair. So I don't know, how do you guys feel about that stuff?
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem as well is, well, stems from other types of vehicles, because like 90% of the time, the type that wins matches is, fighters and the variants of fighters. It's quite rare to find a match that's won by bombers or even attackers, outside of the realms of like B-29s and Tu-4s and things.
I was the one thing that sticks out in my mind is B-29 spam.
Yeah. Like, I think Gaijin will never. Well, at least I think so. I don't think Gaijin will remove attackers and bombers from ARB because people have paid for the premiums, and it's like, well, I had fun doing this. I paid. I bought your product to play this in this way, and you've completely changed the way it works. I don't think they'd be able to do that. So I
All my
think,
dads do.
yeah, they'd need to actually change the way the mode works initially, but catering to those vehicles, because a lot attackers just don't work in ARB at all. I don't think they've ever really worked.
No.
It's rare that you can actually get a game and fly out, destroy loads of targets, go back and rearm and re-engage and things like that, because you can destroy lots of light units, light targets and things, but even some attackers don't actually have the capabilities to take out heavy units like heavy tanks or pillboxes and things like that.
That's when you spawn on a map without them, yeah.
Yeah,
With it, you might not do anything.
and I think ground targets themselves need a bit of work like that as well. Like,
100%.
Ships can't be taken out by anything other than bombs or rockets. So if you get Normandy and you're an attacker, you can't really do anything. I think there needs to be a lot more dynamic ground targets, I think, and a bit more prevalence being brought on from like bombers, light bombers, attackers, and things, so they can actually have a part in the match and not drag the rest of the team down by taking up a spot that could have been used for a fighter. I think their relevance in terms of where they spawn and things should be changed as well. Even the maps, because they're getting to the ground targets at the same time that the enemy can intercept them, meaning that they can't do anything. They're completely useless like that. I mean, sure, there's going to be instances where they do get a lucky run and they don't get intercepted and they can take out some units, but that's not it should be reliable. They should be able to do that all the time, at least for a little bit before getting intercepted. I think there's lots of problems like that, and it all comes down to most of the mechanics of RB just being legacy from when it started.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, look at ground forces. We have all these tanks modeled in game as somebody as a user playing them. There should be no. I mean, the tanks, I think they have updated in ground forces. You can hit a tank and it actually registers like a tank would. But I wish that was the same for everything. I mean, I don't think they should be cutting corners. I just don't think they've put time into it, to be honest. But like a pillbox that was actually modeled and has a certain thickness on the walls of it.
Different parts of the walls, yeah.
And the boats now that are actually boats that are rendered and modeled in game. They can have damage models the same way a normal boat is. Just because it's an AI doesn't mean, it's any different. I don't think it should be any different.
If you go and test your helis, as I know you've been doing,
Mm-hmm.
you do actually have those damage models now.
Yes,
but I don't know if that's just on the test vehicles.
It could be.
To backtrack a little bit when it comes to attackers, Oxy. So obviously I use a lot of CAS. In every regard, I fly a lot of planes in Grind RB. I'm one of them shitlords. And if you have a vehicle that obviously doesn't have that ordnance, you need to grind it out in RB or pay for it. So trying to grind that stuff out, and you manage to squeeze out these lucky games every now and then. But yeah, the amount of times that like someone who is just throwing away all the advantage that they would have to fight fighters and smashing themselves onto the deck to just come and kill you is a frustrating mechanic that pushes people away, which is something that I find that the majority of the things that we've been discussing about ARB, basically what they do is they push people away. Like the guy that you spoke about that doesn't play anymore, he's been pushed away. These mechanics need to be adjusted so that they are more about retention. There's a reason for them to exist, and it's not frustrating to use.
I feel like now I've been trying to word this in a way that actually sounds proper. because I think a lot of the reasons why the mode fails at the moment, and this is going to initially sound just wrong, is that I think there's too much influence from how long the games last and how they flow on the players, and it's dictated too much from the players. And I don't think it should be like that. What I mean is, a player can draw the game out by hiding in space. A
Mm-hmm.
player can, ruin the experience of an attacker or a player or whatever just by diving and going for them and sacrificing themselves. And the game allows those things to happen. I mean, sure, you should give the players control to control the outcome of the match, but I think in terms of the mechanics like that, there needs to be some limitations in between how much they can actually influence things like how long the match lasts individually and disrupting other types of vehicles like attackers so relentlessly. And I think things like that should be adjusted and controlled by the game. So like for attackers, I think they should at least spawn a lot closer, or there should be a different part of the map, maybe a lot further off, where they spawn from maybe a forward airfield and they can actually do some damage before the possibility of being intercepted, rather than the possibility of them being intercepted before they can do anything. Because for like a general player, they're mainly defenseless; they can't really do anything, and it's just what's the fun in taking off, flying for 2 or 3 minutes, and getting killed by someone you can't do anything against? And the game allows that to happen. I don't think it should.
I agree. Definitely agree on that. So I think we're good on ARB for the time being, right? I think we touched everything. I want to know about light tanks and IFVs and more that they could do on the battlefield, as well as something that I kind of want to touch on is the RP reward for being an IFV and repairing people and scouting people. I think that it's a little underwhelming for essentially doing something that could win you the game. I think it's a little underwhelming.
Definitely.
The battlefield utilization of light tanks and IFVs in the real world is wholly different to how they're used in game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to use a hammer to do something a screwdriver should do. I think to a certain point you're never going to get sort of full parity and balance with them, because they're not meant to do what they do in game. Like defending themselves against tanks with 80 gems and stuff like that, they're not really supposed to.
They're just a precautionary measure.
Well, if you know that there's going to be tanks in a particular place, you don't send your IFVs, you send your tanks.
Yeah.
You send your, you send your CAS. You get rid of them by other means. You send your small recon teams and you peep them out and you bomb them. You don't throw IFVs up against tanks willy nilly. So the implementation that we have of them in the game is very different to the real world. So there's limited stuff that you can develop on that front, but they are in a pretty good state. I would say they're fun to play.
Oh, I agree. I'm not saying that they're not fun. I just think the requirement for, or not the requirement, the RP gain you get from scouting vehicles, which is a very important thing. You don't really get anything for it. It's a bunch of fluff. It puts shit on the screen just to make you feel like you're doing something. But at the end of the game, you don't really get anything more or less than what you would normally get in a normal tank for scouting. And it's such an, I think that kind of deters people from scouting a lot or using their scout vehicles the way that they should be used as a solid support vehicle, really rolling behind the tanks and scouting for them and repairing them when they need help. And again, I think the crew member feature should be implemented. I think we talked about this a while ago, but an IFV could carry infantry. And of course, this game doesn't have infantry, so why not give them crew that could replace crew in other tanks that have lost it, so that person doesn't have to go back to a cap like they normally would.
Yeah, I really, really love that idea.
Yeah, you know that when it comes to this stuff, I tend to go from quite a real world standpoint, in so much as I was like, shouldn't even have parts, really. Can't really repair anything other than your tracks in the field. But
yeah,
as a game mechanic, I respect that a lot. I do like that.
Well, it is still a game.
It is still a game.
There are other simulators that you can play tanks that are far more accurate than War Thunder. But as a somewhat fun tank game that's somewhat realistic, and it can teach you a lot about vehicles. I've learned a lot about vehicles in this game. I just wish that something that has such a unique feature like an IFV that can literally carry, 8 guys. I don't understand why it doesn't have that type of sway on the battlefield. Like, these vehicles are very important. We'd see more of them, and I think it'd be a more dynamic battle if you see, you know, Abrams and hopefully in the future Bradleys rolling together with Challies and more warriors than what we have now. Usually it's like, oh, there's a warrior on my team, like there's one, you know what I mean, instead of a full-fledged, what would be almost equal IFVs and main battle tanks in the top tier with helicopters. And I think it would start to add more of that real dynamic battlefield feel.
As a game mechanic, IFVs providing crew to tanks does work. It works in my mind. I respect it.
Yeah, I think a lot of
The
the problem with IFVs, just in terms of how the game works right now, is that they're expected to work like other vehicles and how the maps are laid out. But I mean, obviously, some maps they can get a flank on and they can shoot people in the side, and you know it works, and that's great. But that's not always going to be possible. And I think because of that, there needs to be extras added to the class to actually give them something else to do. I mean, they can do support stuff by, you know, repairing people and giving crew, which I really do like that idea. But are there any offensive things they can be doing while not directly fighting toe to toe with other vehicles from the front when it's not possible? Like, what else could they have to give them something to do while they can't be passive and help the team?
But warrior doctrine is you leather. You know, if they were coming up to a particular, say, trench line or whatever, they leather the position, they drop the mans out, and then the mans attack the position. So ground targets that IFVs and stuff could attack they would need to be bigger maps because the tanks would just pop them anyway. But
Yeah.
means for the IFVs to have other objectives that maybe the tanks don't have access to could be a thing. But then you get to a point where if you're limiting stuff that sort of tanks can do and IFVs can't do, what IFVs can do and tanks can't do, it's the same sort of thing as having a bomber on your team as the last guy. You're not going to win because you don't have access to an IFV that's going to do the objective that you need to do to win.
That's true.
Agreed. Maybe some type of, we have a lot of 3-cap game modes now. What if there were 5 caps and 2 of the caps could only be captured by IFVs? That's just a thought.
Yeah,
but
I
also have the idea of, what if IFVs got access to a better type of artillery?
I like that a lot.
Maybe you could call in, instead of the normal artillery that we get with HE Splash, it's MLRS artillery or something like that, which, you know, a little bit more effective. There'd have to be some type of balance thing. I don't want a scout tank to just be like, yeah, already on this position, 5 dead tanks, but just something a little bit more powerful, because, you know, artillery or smoke artillery rounds. That's a great actual thing for it.
Yeah.
Smoke artillery. Maybe the option to just have multiple different types of artillery. You could have HE artillery from howitzers. You could have some smoke shells dropped by howitzers. You could have some MLRS artillery. Just a little bit more variation to these vehicles, making them more unique, more people playing them, and again, adding to that type of thing. Because as we see more helicopters, IFVs are really good at taking out helicopters.
Yeah, like uniqueness that you touched on there is something that definitely would help IFVs. Because I mean, like, as a battlefield ratio, you're more likely to see an IFV than you are a tank.
Yes.
In the modern battlefield.
Of course.
So yeah, having more sort of bonuses to playing them would be good. But it's down to the sort of fantasy fulfillment, isn't it? Right. The reason the X1 was so popular is because everyone wants an Abram. Everyone wants to be that guy rolling over the sign going, America, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Which you can't do in a Bradley, really. It's not quite the same.
No, but if the Bradley gets more bonuses for scouting, some crew members to help each other, you know, maybe you'll see more of them or something like that. The Warrior the same way.
Supports are really good in MOBAs, but you don't see very many people wanting to be support mains. Everyone wants to be the damage dealer.
Yeah, exactly. That is true as well. But, you know, you're never going to... If somebody wants to play the Abrams, I have no problem with them playing the Abrams. I'm just saying, right now it's... I understand why more people play the Abrams over, you know, or... excuse me. Let's just say, like, the T80 versus the BMP argument or something like that. You're going to see more T80s than a BMP at top tier. And you could say BR difference, but as far as I'm concerned, the BMP2 is an 8.0 or 10.0. And
you can play it up there, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I just like to see more of those. I'd want to see like real battle group type things, and that kind of segues into another thing I want to ask you guys is actual armored vehicles, not Not the Bradleys, the IFVs type of thing. I'm talking about wheeled armored vehicles with small, very powerful weaponry, like
Striker MGS.
yeah, things like that. You know, a Humvee with a tow missile on it, so, stuff like that.
Weasels.
Weasels,
I
exactly.
want a weasel.
Do you think
We had a bunch of Milan armed Land Rovers as well.
that's probably see things like that? I think would be pretty cool and unique too. And like you said, you run into more of those on a modern battlefield than you run into main battle tanks.
I think at low tier, you know, SPAAs can be very, very dangerous to the tanks of the battlefield. So to have things that have literally no armor but a big stick at top tier, i.e., sort of ATGM cars and so on and so forth, and Striker MGS and things like that. Yeah, I can agree with that. Diversity on the battlefield is something that we could really do with at top tier.
Yeah.
I know, obviously, one of the reasons that you don't really like top tier is that there's not as much diversity.
Yeah, it's just I just don't like that every nation, it's like there's one or two vehicles that you're going to see in any given instance, really. And I think having lots of different things, doing lots of different, well, performing lots of different roles is something I think at least would draw me to top tier a little bit more. But I think it's something that's needed anyway. Just other types of vehicles that can do things the bigger ones can't. I think that there are like lots of options for that, and I don't really know why they're not in the game yet. So those wheeled vehicles with like the big sticks, I think those would be really really well received by the community as well. And just from a gameplay standpoint, I think it's definitely a good direction. I'm all for that.
I mean, I just think this would be so cool. I'm looking at this Humvee right now with the tow missile, and just imagine scaling the side of a mountain after just hauling ass to it, and you're launching tow missiles from like a hidden location, and it would be even more tense. You have even less armor to deal with. You can easily be penned by anything at top tier, but it's like that game of cat and
Anyone
mouse.
can press their MG key and just go, and you're dead. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
exactly.
I mean, different with an apartment Humvee.
Matt, you run into an IS-7 in this
Get along
thing.
with it.
Oh my god! You're like, no, IS-7, leave me alone, please.
Italians get the Vespa with the Recordless rifles on the side. Love it.
Okay, so I think that was pretty good. You want to just ask the viewers for some questions now, answer some questions from viewers, and
We didn't touch on tutorials.
that is a good
Introduction to new players.
that is a good idea, but we do have one of these next week too, and the week after.
This
and
is
the
true.
Week after.
This is true.
But if you guys would like to talk about, I looked up weasels. I only got a couple pictures of weasels, but look at this thing. When are we getting a real weasel in this game? Things fucking
WIESEL. Yeah, there you go. You can see the actual ones. Look at that though. You can get a cannon on it. You can get hot missiles on it. I'm sure there's one with SPAA.
But yeah, no, these things are cool. Look at this little tank.
Something that Colo asked earlier on and asked in my Discord as well is Japan.
Yes.
Japan and expansion of their tree. And I don't know about you two, but my sort of stance on this is that the Cold War, to a certain point, becomes US and friends versus the USSR. So you can only expand the Japanese tree so far. When they're meant to be a strategic defense force, they used a lot of US equipment, not much of their own proprietary stuff until you get sort of later developments of lots and lots of things. Lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff. I agree. That's on the topic of adding, a tech tree with that it's combined nations. You know what I mean? Like small nations tech tree. And I have no issues with that. I think that is a way better idea than actually trying to make a full-fledged tree out of what is essentially nothing. Japan they have good tanks. They have really good tanks in certain parts, but they don't have a lot of them. They don't have a lot of the same. When you look at like the Russian tech tree, it's got 5 different lines that go down the entire tech tree. You look at Japan, they have 1, 2 in some spots.
But the historical precedent is not there for them to have as fleshed out a tech tree as
agree.
Russia, as Germany, as America. Like exactly the same with Britain. Our development in Britain has always been quite linear in terms of we've got this thing, now we've got this thing, now we've got that thing, dup, 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 and they're only superseded when they need to be superseded. Whereas the Russians, the Germans, the Americans are very much sort of like, Make a
Yeah,
slightly
they're
different
pushing
vehicle.
the
Just make a
envelope in
slightly
terms
different one.
of
Push, 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 push.
yeah, they're making a bunch of different things, and I get that.
Yeah.
But for small tech trees like that, I wish we had more variation. If, for example, like the Type 74, give me 3 variants of the Type 74 that people will have to grind and they'll complain about. Put them in one stack card, and now people have 3 Type 74s, and then
Exactly the same as the 254.
yeah, exactly. And then, it's less of a problem about lineup because they do have a great AA at that tier. They have a good little scout tank. I'm sure they can do more within that stuff, but add some different types of variations. Add something with I'm sure they had some type of variation with ERA or a slightly different turret or some slightly different ammo. And
Look, there's no shortage of prototypes in the game now.
yeah, exactly. So I think that would be pretty cool. Just add some diversity for those trees. That's what I'm worried about, the Italian tree too, when it's coming.
It's just going to be German trees.
Exactly. It'll be cool. They'll put cool camos on the German tanks. But
yeah, absolutely. But, it's going to have the same problem as Japan in that the competitiveness at them at top tier is going to be limited somewhat by the depth of the lineup. And that's the same across the board. If you only have a fraction of the proprietary vehicles for a given nation, you're not going to have the depth of the lineup, and depth of lineup, especially with the spawn points changes, is something that is a key point of a nation being competitive at a certain tier.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I think Japan is going to be the nation that needs it the most. So what have they got at top? So they've got the Type 90. I guess the Type 74 can be used as a backup, not amazingly, but it can be. And for CAS, they have the Saber with bombs, and it's like it's not really enough. But I mean, Gaijin's kind of stand on it, I guess, is that getting the information on those vehicles is really, really hard, which I guess probably is true. I mean, I imagine that the Type 74G isn't added because they can't correctly model it. I imagine they would have done it already if they could, because they've already got the base model there. It would just require a little bit of adjustment. So I think filling the gaps with US stuff would probably be a pretty decent idea, but as long as they were sort of locked to only playing with the US, I think that would probably be like a decent compromise, at least for now, until they can find other vehicles to fill the gaps in.
Yeah, I agree. But I do think it's something that they should look at, and we can continue to talk about as this progresses, and keep checking up on it and making sure.
Something that obviously we're going to do in the future, which we haven't really done on this episode, is examine specific vehicles and specific lineups.
Yeah, we're going to get more.
There's a breadth of knowledge there.
Exactly. And that's why I'm excited for this. I think that this is good so far. So if we want to take some viewer questions and any feedback on this, how we can improve this every week. Now, next week, I don't know if Oxia, if you're going to be on cam, but Kath, you should be, right? And
yes, madam.
So we'll have at least 2 cams going, and the gameplay will be a little bit smaller. But Oxy, thanks for providing us with the background footage this time.
It's okay.
It actually turned out great. This video isn't over yet because you make videos that are far too long.
I know.
So I'm going to link this for everybody in case anybody wants to watch the whole video. But yeah,
if you have an hour and 13 minutes, it's a good video. You should go watch it anyway.
It is.
Rather than go, what is that? What is that? When something kills you and you've never seen it before.
Croc should be here when he's done being lazy. It's not like we didn't plan for this.
We've sort of shared the hosting between us, but it was not supposed to be like this.
Maybe he's gonna come back and be like, "Oh, it was just a test for you guys." Croc is supposed to be the one with the bullet points.
Dude, I want to see how you did.
I'm glad you did it without me, dude. But
yeah. Sound like Ice Poseidon.
But yeah, I think it'll be good. I think we do need more Croc.
Questions and feedback, boys, please. Oh, speak of the devil, he's awake. He's awake.
He just woke up.
He just woke up.
Yeah, well, it's too late now. But so the CL-13 and the German MiG fighting the exact same vehicles but worse. I feel similar on that. I'll leave it for another day, but I did propose an idea of mixed battles pretty recently, and I don't know if it's a bad idea or a good idea, but I think it would definitely be interesting to say the least, even if it was just a test event
Mhm.
where there was just, you could do mixed ARB with a 0.3
If you
VR
have-
spread.
If you have a load of German players queuing, why not split them between East and West Germany? 'Cause
See,
you can do that in
that's
ARB.
that's another question, too, for a different day. But I think I've always wondered why that wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Why wouldn't it be like that? But
I don't know how easy it would be to code, to be fair.
ground EC, we didn't touch on ground EC. We talked about air EC today, but I think ground
Ground-
EC would be cool. They're working on that World War mode. I didn't get a chance to check it out though because they were kind of really exclusive, and then now I haven't heard anything about it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's there's a lot of development they're doing with it. I'm not really sure how it's going to end up. And I played it a little bit, and it was a bit confusing, but it was kind of enjoyable. Like I didn't have a bad time playing it, but it doesn't really make much sense. I think it's probably a bit too early to say what's going to happen with it, but I guess that's going to be the natural progression of what EC could be, I guess, for tanks. But as it stands, they're going to need to make a unique map for it, otherwise it just wouldn't really work.
Yeah, I don't want to see, I do not want to see some variant of ground enduring confrontation on normal maps. No thanks, no thanks, no thanks. You can make super simplistic, big old maps and just have them miles and miles long, but not particularly wide. And it's like a tug of war, right? Push and push back and push back and counter attacks and stuff like that. That would be brilliant.
Hmm.
I do not want them to do this World War stuff and enduring confrontation stuff on the ground in normal maps.
Yeah, it
will
doesn't work.
Cripple it.
Yeah, totally agree.
I also think some of these larger maps require more players for ground RB.
Yeah, they do.
Like
I've
large
had,
Poland, 12v12,
Yeah.
not my shtick. Maybe
Maybe less
32 versus
wide.
32. Maybe
Yeah,
even
like,
more.
I mean, what even is the maximum amount of players we can have in a lobby in War Thunder? How many can you get in an arcade lobby?
15? I think 15. 16?
16, I think.
Yeah.
What aside?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd like to see 30 to like 64 player games. I know they had that in custom battles, and I think that'd be way better for, you know what I mean? How much better would large Poland be if you could just had more tanks to shoot at, more tanks with you?
I feel like they could, at least for maps like that, they could extend the borders of large Poland, because I mean, it's modeled. If you get to the map boundary and look out, you can see that, it's still textured and stuff. They could make it bigger and add some more like dynamic bits of cover and things. I think some maps like that definitely have the potential to be sort of made a lot bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they wouldn't even need to make it look super fancy. Just make it bigger. There's more places to go.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
there's no problem with that as long as
Not
they add
every
more
map. Not every map
Yeah.
has to be as clutter-filled as Italy, or as
Yeah.
we're looking at now, Normandy. Like, not every map has to have this much clutter. Look at Mozdok. Mozdok's got barely anything on it, and it's one of the best maps in the game for tanks.
Exactly.
Even bit like the Sim Mozdok, the big Sim Mozdok. Such a good map.
Yeah,
Good map.
those things can definitely work.
So much counterplay, so many places that you can be, and it's not even about a load of cover. It's not even about a load of map objects. It's just the lay of the land suits large combat. Put more players on it. Put some sort of tug and war aspect to it, attack and defend. There you go. That's enduring confrontation, but not on the same map.
But yeah, so good podcast.
Yeah.
I think we
That was a
talked
fun
about
time.
some important stuff. If you guys missed any part of the podcast, I'll be uploading it, I think, to my channel until we figure out a solid means to upload it and put it somewhere. Expect next week to have a little bit more going on. We're gonna ease
a bit
into
more
it.
polish.
A bit more polish, yeah. Kind of wung this one a little bit, but I think it turned out good. I enjoyed it.
Guys, while we're all here, if you have some feedback for us, how you think it went, please let us know.
Yeah. Contact any of us. Discord, anything. I'm
Oxy
open.
loves being pinged repetitively in his own Discord. He loves it.
I mean, I don't like it very much, to be honest. Not my favorite.
Especially in the politics channel.
Hook, thank you for the sub, man.
Not a nice time.
But yeah, if anybody ever has any problems with War Thunder, you just gotta tell them to angle better. I think that's the biggest thing that we've learned from today.
Any tank that is weak can be significantly improved if you just
Angle better.
fucking angle better.
Just angle better.
Pop
So
your
I'm popping a link. I'm popping some links in here, guys, and Oxy and Kath are the other
everyone.
people
Welcome
on
to the channel.
the podcast. If you didn't know by now,
Us.
and this isn't just a thing. Like, this isn't mine. I want that to be noted. This is ours. It's our podcast. Just because it's just me today, we wung it a little bit. And this is the logo thus far. Let us know what you think about it. I don't know how to point. Let us know what you think about that logo thus far. You want merch? Merch link in fucking bio. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, criticism.
Dance. We didn't even touch on boats, but there's always next week.
There's always next week, and again, more polish. We'll have better talking points next week, and then when we go off the cuff, we can kind of have fun winging it. Now that we know we do it, and we can